My name is Amara Ellison. I'm 31 years old, a grown woman, and a single mother to a beautiful 7-year-old girl named Sophia. Somewhere along the way, my entire existence narrowed into one purpose: protecting her from the nightmare I barely survived growing up. My parents like to pretend none of that ever happened. They call it normal family conflict. My mother loves to roll her eyes and say, "You're so dramatic, Amara. Every family has tension." My father prefers silence, a slight shake of his head, a disappointed sigh, like my pain is an inconvenience he's too dignified to acknowledge. But here's what they always leave out. They never treated my younger sister Vanessa that way. Vanessa is their precious princess, their golden child who can do no wrong. I was the target, the disappointment, the family punching bag they'd been using for sport since I was old enough to form memories. They shaped me with criticism and then accused me of being too sensitive when I bled. That Saturday afternoon, as I pulled into my parents' driveway for yet another backyard cookout, I could already feel my chest tightening. Every time I forced myself to attend these gatherings, I whispered the same mantra under my breath. Stay neutral, stay calm, keep your distance, don't let them get under your skin. The only reason I went was because my mother had laid the guilt on thick over the phone earlier that week. "People are starting to notice how distant you've become," she'd said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Don't embarrass this family just because you can't let go of ancient history." Ancient history. That's what she called decades of systematic emotional abuse and humiliation. Sophia stood beside me near the patio, still wearing her purple leotard and black leggings from gymnastics practice that morning. She'd refused to change. She was so excited. In her mind, today was about hot dogs, silly jokes with cousins, and maybe dipping her toes in the pool. She had no idea we'd just walked into a viper pit. Vanessa strutted out onto the deck in an expensive designer sundress like she was stepping onto a runway. She gave my daughter a slow once-over, from the scuffed sneakers to the faded leggings, and then looked at me. "Wow," she said, loud enough for the entire patio to hear, lips curled into a smirk. "Still can't afford to dress her like she matters, huh?" Sophia's small shoulders slumped. Her eyes dropped to the concrete. I felt my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Not today, I told myself. No confrontations, no explosions. Do not give them the satisfaction. But Vanessa was never satisfied with one blow. She glided closer, her perfume sharp and sweet, and lowered her voice to that venomous whisper I knew too well. "You honestly think that kid is going to amount to anything? You're raising a worse version of yourself, Amara." I stared straight ahead, refusing to react. This was their game. Circle me, cut me, wait for the outburst, then label me unstable. Behind us, my mother chuckled, swirling the wine in her glass, like this was all stand-up comedy. "That's what happens when you make poor choices with men," she chimed in, her tone coated in mock sympathy. "Garbage in, garbage out." Sophia's small hand found mine and squeezed tight. I squeezed back, keeping my face blank while my heart splintered inside my chest. Then my father appeared, and the smell of beer hit me before his words did. "You look absolutely miserable, Amara," he said, voice carrying that polished disappointment he'd perfected over the years. "Maybe if you'd tried being a bit more ladylike growing up, you wouldn't have ended up a single mother in that sad little apartment." There it was, their favorite group activity, psychological warfare disguised as concern. They took turns circling me like sharks, testing which line would finally make me snap so they could point and say, "See? She's crazy. We're the victims here." I took a slow breath and knelt down to Sophia's level, forcing my voice to stay gentle. "Hey, baby, why don't you go sit by the edge of the pool and watch the water for a bit? I'll make you a plate with extra ketchup, just how you like it." Her eyes brightened a little. She nodded and walked toward the deep end, her purple leotard glowing in the afternoon sun. I turned away for maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds to grab a paper plate. 5 seconds to reach for the tongs. 5 seconds to pull myself together. When I turned back, the world went silent. Vanessa was standing directly behind Sophia at the edge of the deep end. I saw her hands on my daughter's shoulders. And before my brain could even process what I was seeing, she shoved Sophia. Both hands hard. My daughter flew forward and crashed into the water, fully clothed. Purple leotard, black leggings, sneakers, all of it. The scream that tore out of my throat didn't sound human. It was raw, animal, torn from a place in me that had never known language. I bolted toward the pool, my feet barely touching the ground. Sophia was sinking. Her dark hair spread around her like ink dissolving in water. Her sneakers dragged her down. She wasn't coming up. She was 7 years old and panicking, her small body thrashing, then slowing, sinking. I was 3 feet from the edge when an arm looped around my throat from behind and yanked me backward with brutal force. "Stop!" My father snarled directly into my ear, his forearm crushing my windpipe. "She needs to learn to handle herself. If she can't survive water, she doesn't deserve to survive at all." For one heartbeat, I genuinely thought I was going to pass out. My lungs burned. Black spots edged my vision. I clawed at his arm, my fingernails digging into his skin hard enough to draw blood. Sophia's name ripped from my throat, shredded and broken. At the edge of the pool, Vanessa stood with her arms crossed, laughing. My mother stood right beside her, sipping her wine, watching my daughter drown like it was afternoon entertainment. Sophia's small body dipped beneath the surface again. No more splashing, just air bubbles. Something inside me snapped. I drove my heel back into my father's shin with every ounce of strength I had left. He stumbled, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. I tore free and dove into the pool. Clothes, shoes, everything. The cold hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. All I could see was Sophia's face underwater, eyes wide and terrified, searching for me. I wrapped my arm around her chest and kicked hard, dragging us both upward until we broke the surface. Sophia coughed violently, choking, her small hands scrambling for me. I hauled her out of the pool and collapsed onto the concrete, cradling her against my chest. She was trembling, gasping, a thin line of foam at the corner of her mouth. Her breathing sounded wrong, too wet, too harsh. I looked up at my family. Vanessa still wore that self-satisfied smirk, like she'd pulled off a brilliant prank. My father straightened his shirt, as if he'd heroically stopped me from overreacting. My mother rolled her eyes. "Always such a drama queen, Amara," she said, bored. It was one little dip in the pool. One little dip. My daughter had almost drowned. My father had physically restrained me from saving her. My sister had shoved her in. And somehow, in their narrative, I was still the problem. I held Sophia tighter. I felt something inside me lock into place with terrifying clarity. This wasn't a family. It had never been a family. It was a carefully curated stage where they built themselves up by tearing me down. But now they had crossed a line I never believed they would cross. They had tried to hurt my child. They had tried to stop me from protecting her. Right there, soaking wet, concrete burning my knees, Sophia's ragged breaths against my shoulder, I made a decision. Their world was going to collapse, and they wouldn't even see the first cracks until it was far too late. My hands were shaking as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I forced my voice to steady as I dialed 911 and pressed it to my ear. "My daughter was deliberately pushed into a pool and held under," I said when the dispatcher answered. "She's 7 years old. She's conscious, but she's having trouble breathing. We need an ambulance, now." In the distance, I thought I heard the faint wail of sirens beginning to rise. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel crazy. I felt ready. The sirens grew louder, slicing through the afternoon like a warning bell the whole neighborhood could hear. My parents hated public attention when they weren't controlling it. I saw it immediately. The way my mother's face tightened, the way my father's jaw clenched. For the first time that day, Vanessa's smirk flickered. Good, I thought. Let them feel something close to fear. The paramedics moved fast. 2 of them came through the back gate with a stretcher, while another knelt in front of me and Sophia. "What's her name?" he asked, already checking her breathing, his fingers gently tilting her chin. Sophia, I managed. 7 years old. She was pushed into the deep end and she couldn't get out. She inhaled water. Sophia was still coughing, small body racked with spasms, each gasp scraping like sandpaper in her lungs. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, clinging to my face like I was the only solid thing in the world. "Okay, Sophia," the paramedic said calmly. "You're doing really well. We're going to help you breathe better, okay?" He wrapped a thermal blanket around her, another over my shoulders that I barely felt. Another paramedic checked her pulse, listened carefully to her lungs. "We're transporting her," one of them said. "Riverside General. Possible secondary drowning risk. She needs observation." My mother stepped forward, wine glass still in her hand. "Oh, come on," she scoffed. "Is all this really necessary? It was just a little fall in the pool. Kids love drama." The male paramedic didn't even look at her. He kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, she's having difficulty breathing. We're not debating this." I almost smiled. They loaded Sophia onto the stretcher. She cried out, reaching for me, and I climbed into the ambulance beside her without waiting for permission. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of my parents' perfect backyard, the trimmed hedges, the glittering pool, the faces beginning to pale as the sound of the siren rose and swallowed the afternoon. For once, they weren't in charge of the story. Inside the ambulance, time warped. The world shrank to the inside of that metal box, Sophia's shallow breaths, and the paramedic's low voice as he kept her talking. "Do you like swimming, Sophia?" he asked. She shook her head, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. "Okay," he said gently. "Then our job is to make sure your lungs are okay, so you never have to be scared of water again, all right?" I held her hand so tightly my fingers went numb. I was terrified. Terrified she'd stop breathing. Terrified the paramedics would turn to me and say I had overreacted, that it wasn't that serious, that I had ruined everything for nothing. But they didn't. No one rolled their eyes. No one said I was dramatic. No one told me it was just a little dip. They treated my daughter like a child who had been in danger, not a prop in someone's performance. At the hospital, everything became a blur of bright lights and rapid movement. They wheeled Sophia through the emergency room doors, a nurse calling out details to another as they moved. I followed, soaked clothes clinging to me, hair dripping onto the white floor. "Ma'am, we need you to step over here while we get her settled," a nurse said, touching my arm. "No, my voice cracked. "I need to stay with her." "You will," she promised. "Let us just get her stabilized. You'll be right back at her side in a moment." A moment stretched into a pocket of eternity. They put me in a plastic chair in the hallway, the kind that squeaks every time you shift your weight. I watched through a small glass pane as they checked Sophia's oxygen levels, fitted a mask, set up monitors. Her little body looked too small on that bed, lost in white sheets and wires. "Ms. Ellison?" a voice said. I tore my eyes away from the window. A woman in dark blue scrubs stood in front of me, holding a clipboard. Her face was calm but serious. "I'm Dr. Hayes," she said. "I'm the attending physician for your daughter." How is she?" I asked, my throat dry. "She's stable right now," Dr. Hayes replied. "Her oxygen levels are a little low, and we can hear some fluid in her lungs. That's not uncommon after a near drowning. We're going to keep her for observation for several hours, possibly overnight, to monitor for secondary complications." Secondary complications. My chest tightened. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" she asked. I swallowed. This was the moment. The one where my entire life, telling the truth, had been met with denial, rewriting, and accusations of being too sensitive. "She was pushed into the deep end of a pool," I said slowly, "by my younger sister, deliberately. And when I tried to jump in after her, my father grabbed me and held me back by the throat." Dr. Hayes didn't blink. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" She didn't ask if it might have been an accident. She just lowered her pen for a second and looked directly at me. "Who was supervising the children at the pool?" she asked. "No one," I said. "They were drinking, laughing, watching." She wrote that down. "Who pushed your daughter?" she asked again, clearly, firmly. "My sister Vanessa," I answered. Saying it out loud made my stomach twist, but also solid, real. "And your father physically restrained you from intervening?" "Yes." She took a breath. "Okay, thank you for telling me. We're going to document this thoroughly." They photographed the bruises already darkening on my neck and arms where my father had grabbed me. They wrote down the timeline. They confirmed his words as best they could from my statement. It felt like watching my life translated into a language the world finally took seriously. Medical notes, formal descriptions, evidence. A short while later, a woman with a badge that read Hospital Social Worker, Elena Morales, approached me in a small consultation room off the main ER hall. She had gentle eyes, but her voice was steady, the kind of steady that comes from seeing too many things that never should have happened. "Amara," she said, sitting across from me. "I've reviewed Dr. Hayes' notes and the photographs, and I've spoken briefly with the ER staff. I need to explain something important to you." I nodded, my fingers clenched around a styrofoam cup of water I'd forgotten to drink. "I'm required by law," she continued, "to file a report with Child Protective Services. Your daughter was deliberately put in danger, and an adult physically prevented you from intervening. This is serious. It's not going to be treated as a minor family disagreement." A strange sensation rose in my chest. It wasn't panic. It wasn't shame. It was relief. For years, I had begged people to see what my parents were doing and been dismissed. Now, the system itself was saying, "This is real. This matters." "I understand," I said quietly. "Please, do whatever you need to do to keep her safe." Elena nodded. "We'll file the report today. CPS will assign a caseworker, and they'll likely contact you within 24 hours. In the meantime, I'm going to let the police liaison know what happened. They'll want to take your statement as well." "Will they talk to my parents?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "They'll go to the scene, take photographs, and speak with any witnesses you can name. Do you know anyone who saw what happened?" 3 faces flashed in my mind. My cousins, standing frozen near the grill when Vanessa shoved Sophia. "My cousins," I said. "James, Leah, and David. They were all there." "Good," she replied. "We'll pass those names on." When the officers arrived, everything shifted again. A male officer took basic details, but it was the woman who took over the longer statement. Her badge read, Detective Torres. She had sharp, tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone that somehow made me feel safer. "Ms. Ellison," she said, sitting opposite me at the small table. "I'm going to walk through what happened, start to finish, and I'll ask you some questions as we go. If you need a break, tell me. If you remember more later, we can add to your statement." I nodded. She didn't rush me. She didn't doubt me. She didn't look impatient when my voice shook, describing my father's arm crushing my throat. "Has anything like this happened before?" she asked at one point. "Any incidents where your parents put your daughter in danger, or you?" A laugh escaped me, bitter and humorless. "Yes," I said. "Not like this. But years of emotional abuse, threats disguised as advice, belittling. They've never liked that I left home, or that I stopped letting them babysit Sophia unsupervised." "And have you documented any of that?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. I have texts, voicemails, recordings. I didn't know if I'd ever use them. I just saved them." "Good," she said simply. "Don't delete anything. That could be relevant." When the statement was finished, she slid a card across the table. "This is my direct contact information," she said. "You don't have to go back to that house. Not for any reason. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" "Yes," I said. "A hotel. I didn't want them to know where we were." "Good," she repeated. "We'll be visiting your parents' property later today. We'll document the pool area and speak to the witnesses you named. CPS will coordinate with us. You did the right thing calling 911, Amara." I almost cried when she said my name. Not ma'am, not dear, not honey. Amara. Like I was a real person. By the time I got back to Sophia's bedside, she was propped up on pillows, oxygen mask on, a cartoon playing softly on the mounted TV. Her eyes were heavy, but when she saw me, she tried to smile. "Mom," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "I'm here," I said, brushing wet hair back from her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." "They're not mad at you?" she asked, confused. "Grandma and Grandpa always say you make a big deal out of nothing. They always say you—" She trailed off, eyelids fluttering. I swallowed down 1,000 words. "No one here thinks I'm making a big deal," I said softly. "They're taking this seriously. Because you matter. What happened to you matters." Her fingers curled around mine. Within minutes, she drifted off to sleep. We were finally discharged hours later. 6, maybe 7. Time had dissolved into fluorescent light and the steady beep of monitors. Sophia was cleared as stable, with instructions for rest and warning signs to watch for. The doctor reiterated the same thing. Secondary complications, follow-up appointment, emergency return if breathing worsened. At the discharge desk, the nurse handed me a packet of papers, including one thin sheet clipped to the top. "CPS has been notified," she said. "You'll likely be contacted by a caseworker within the next day, and the police indicated they may follow up with you as well. Do you have transportation?" "Taxi," I said. I'm not going back to my parents' house." "Good idea," she replied quietly. The word good hit me again. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary word, but in my family, any action that even hinted at disobedience was labeled selfish, hysterical, ungrateful. Now strangers were calling my actions good, right, necessary. We rode to a budget hotel across town, the kind with faded carpet and a humming ice machine in the hallway. Sophia leaned against me in the back seat of the taxi, wrapped in her discharge blanket. As soon as we got inside the room, she climbed into the bed and fell asleep for real this time, breath slow and even. I watched her for a long time, sitting in a stiff chair by the window, the city's neon glow bleeding through the curtains. My phone buzzed on the cheap nightstand, an unknown number. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Ms. Ellison?" a crisp, warm voice said. "This is Donna Franklin with Child Protective Services. The hospital submitted a report regarding your daughter, Sophia. I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible to discuss safety planning." I glanced at my daughter, curled tightly under the blanket. "I'm at the Pineway Inn on Westbrook," I said, "room 214. You can come here if that's allowed. It is, she replied. I can be there in about an hour. True to her word, she arrived less than 60 minutes later, dressed in a sensible blazer and slacks, a leather portfolio under her arm. She didn't look pitying. She didn't look hostile. She looked practical. Thank you for letting me come here, she said as I opened the door. I know this is a lot. I gestured toward the small table by the window. I don't know what happens next. That's what I'm here to explain, she said, sitting down and opening her folder. First, I want you to know that our primary concern is Sophia's safety. This report is being treated as an urgent case. We'll be coordinating with the police and with her school. For the next 40 minutes, she walked me through terms I'd only ever heard in TV dramas. Emergency safety plans, supervised visitation protocols, temporary protection orders, restrictions on who could pick Sophia up from school. Can they just take her? I asked at one point, my stomach twisting. My parents? No, Donna said firmly. From what I've seen so far, you are the protective parent. You removed her from danger and sought medical help. Our job is to support you in keeping her safe, not to punish you for reporting. Protective parent. The words lodged themselves in my ribs like a small, glowing anchor. Donna slid a stack of forms toward me. If you're willing, I'd like to put some immediate protections in place. We can flag her file at school, restrict who can pick her up, and start documentation of the pattern you've experienced. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, this time not from fear, but from something that felt dangerously close to hope. I've kept everything, I said. Texts, voicemails, recordings. I thought it made me paranoid, crazy, but I kept them anyway. Good, Donna said, echoing the doctor and nurse. We can catalog those as evidence. As she spoke to Principal Anderson on speakerphone, explaining the situation in calm, formal language, I listened to the words she used. Endangerment, physical restraint, documented injuries. No release to grandparents without written consent. By lunchtime the next day, Sophia would have a confidential safety alert on her student file. Teachers and front office staff would be officially notified never to release her into my parents' custody. They had spent my entire life controlling every room I walked into. For the first time, a door was closing, on them, not on me. Donna closed her folder, stood, and gave me a card. You're not alone in this anymore, Amara, she said. You did exactly what a good mother does. You saw danger, and you acted. From here on, you're not just begging them to be decent. You have structure on your side. After she left, I sat back down by the window. Outside, the city moved like nothing had happened. Cars passing, people walking, lights flickering on and off. Inside the small, dim hotel room, something massive had shifted. They thought they'd nearly drowned my daughter and that I'd cry, then come back for the next barbecue. Instead, I had quietly started a process they couldn't charm, intimidate, or talk their way out of. They had no idea yet. But their reign over my life had just begun to end. Safety doesn't arrive in a single moment. It arrives in layers, thin, practical layers that stack on top of each other until suddenly you realize the air around you feels different. For the first time in my life, I was starting to breathe without asking for permission. When dawn slid through the blinds of the small hotel room, Sophia was still asleep, curled under the stiff white blanket, chest rising and falling in even rhythms. I watched her for a long while, memorizing the steadiness of her breathing, the faint pink returning to her cheeks. I promised myself 2 things. They will never touch her again. They will never touch the version of me who lets things slide for family. By 9 a.m., Donna from CPS returned, portfolio under her arm, ready to move forward. Morning, Amara, she said, stepping inside. How's Sophia? Sleeping, I whispered, finally. Donna nodded compassionately and sat at the small hotel table. We'll move quickly today. Safety plan implementation, school coordination, and then verified contacts. I want to make sure you're protected on every front. She meant it literally. Locks, calls, and new numbers. Within hours, the fortress began to form. I changed my phone number. Just like that, the line my parents used to scream through, guilt trip through, manipulate through, was dead. The new number went only to Donna, Detective Torres, Sophia's school, my attorney, whom Donna recommended, a family law specialist named Lawrence Brennan, and my closest friend, Natasha. I set up a P.O. box so my parents couldn't track my home address through school mail. It felt strange, how empowering such small actions were. I went to my apartment only to install new deadbolts and a security chain. Clicking the lock into place felt like reclaiming a decade. The tools of safety weren't dramatic. They were quiet, mechanical, cold metal and paperwork and signatures. But those were the tools that mattered. Donna's call to the school triggered a chain reaction. By noon, I sat in the guidance office at Sophia's school while Principal Anderson reviewed the emergency safety alert. "This is already in the system," he said, scrolling through his screen. "Sophia will never be released to anyone except you. Ever." "Thank you," I whispered. "We're also alerting all staff," he added. "Substitutes included. Let me introduce you to someone." He gestured for a woman standing nearby. Soft cardigan, kind face. "This is Ms. Patricia, our guidance counselor's assistant. She'll be the point person for Sophia. If anything seems off at pickup, she'll intervene personally." Ms. Patricia smiled gently. "I'll look out for her. Don't worry." And again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. Protected. I refused to let Sophia's relationship with water end with terror. At the community center, where the instructors were trained in child protection protocols, I enrolled her in private lessons. The head instructor, a woman named Jacqueline, knelt to Sophia's eye level that same afternoon. She spoke softly, explaining how the water works, how the body floats, how control, not fear, keeps you safe. When they got into the shallow end, Sophia clung to her like a frightened cat. "It's okay," Jacqueline soothed. "We'll go slow." I watched from the glass window, breath tight, but Sophia learned to float that day. Tiny arms outstretched, trembling, but trying. Later, in the locker room, she whispered, "Mom, if I learn to swim, they can't hurt me again, right?" I hugged her so tightly she squeaked, "No, baby, no one will ever hurt you again." I meant every syllable. The next step in the fortress wasn't about locks or protocols. It was about cutting off the oxygen source my parents thrived on: social admiration. Their image, their reputation, their carefully curated, good family mask. They had always used it as a shield. If we look perfect, no one believes you. But this time I wasn't relying on belief, I relied on facts. I reached out to two people. Aunt Christine, Barbara, my mother's lifelong friend. I didn't rant. I didn't attack. I sent a calm, factual message. Sophia was shoved into a pool and nearly drowned. My father physically restrained me from saving her. Police and CPS are involved. For now, I'm asking that your children not attend gatherings at their home. Christine replied within an hour. "Amara, I'm horrified. I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Thank you for telling me. My kids won't go there anymore." Barbara's reply came 3 hours later. "I'm stunned. I need time to process this, but I won't bring my grandkids around them for now." Small ripples, but important ones. Adults stepping back from my parents was something they'd never experienced. My parents loved performing perfection at church, front row seats, volunteering for every committee, hosting potlucks, calling themselves pillars of the community. So I called Pastor Graham and gave him the straightforward, unembellished truth. He didn't gasp, he didn't pry, he didn't rush to judgment. He only said, "I'm so sorry, Amara, that never should have happened. Let me speak with the council." Within 72 hours, my father's name was quietly removed from the youth ministry volunteer list. My mother's was removed from the hospitality committee. No dramatic announcement, no social media post, just silent doors closing. They wouldn't know why immediately, but they would notice. My dad's identity revolved around hosting. Backyard barbecues, craft beer gatherings, pool parties where he was the king of his domain. So I called his closest friend Greg and explained calmly why Sophia couldn't be at their events. "We can't host at their house," Greg said quietly. "Not after that. We'll hold the next one at my place, adults only." Just like that, my father's stage, the one place he flexed his power, was gone. He wouldn't understand why at first. He'd call people dramatic. He'd blame me, probably. But the truth was simpler. He no longer controlled the narrative. At home, the changes were visible. Sophia ate full meals again. She slept through the night without jolting awake, gasping. She drew pictures, bright ones, with colorful waves and boats and smiling suns. At bedtime, I told her stories about brave explorers who learned to swim in magical oceans, not to remind her of the trauma, but to teach her she could be stronger than it. Watching her heal felt like watching a garden revive after a drought, slowly, tenderly, but undeniably. Meanwhile, my parents' world quietly shrank. No kids at their gatherings, no church responsibilities, no glowing compliments on their perfect family. Their influence was evaporating, not with a scream, but with silence. And deep down, I knew. This wasn't revenge, this was protection. But the final step hadn't happened yet. I needed to walk into their house one last time, not as their daughter, but as a mother reclaiming what was hers. That moment was coming, and they had no idea what was waiting on the other side of their front door. People think revenge is loud. They picture shouting, public confrontations, dramatic exposes. But real revenge, the kind that actually dismantles a person's power, is quiet. It happens in paperwork, in phone calls, in empty seats at events. It happens when the world they built starts shifting grain by grain, until one day they look down and realize they're standing on sand. That week, while Sophia healed, I built something my parents had never expected. A world where they no longer had access to me, or to her. A world where their opinions, their punishments, their manipulations no longer mattered. And the best part? They didn't even know it was happening. After Donna left the hotel that morning, I dove into action. Not emotional action, not screaming or slamming doors, or posting long rants on social media. Real, structured, effective action. The kind my parents could never spin into Amara being dramatic. I called my landlord first. "I need the locks changed," I said. When he hesitated, I added, "I have a police report and a CPS case number." The locks were changed by 3 that afternoon. Next, I set up a P.O. box for all school and legal documents, somewhere my parents couldn't trace or intercept anything. Then I called the phone company. New number, unlisted, unshared, except with Donna, Detective Torres, my attorney Lawrence Brennan, Sophia's school, and Natasha. Everyone else? Voicemail wilderness. It felt like deleting a virus from my life. Lawrence was a middle-aged man with steel gray hair, thin glasses, and a voice like someone who had memorized courtroom walls. We met in his office, Sophia coloring calmly at a small desk in the corner. "I've reviewed the initial police statements," Lawrence said, flipping through pages. "Given the circumstances, we can file for an emergency protection order immediately." My heart skipped. "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said, sliding a packet toward me. "Your parents and your sister will be legally barred from contacting you or Sophia. They will not be allowed near her school, your home, or any public area where you are present." I felt my throat tighten. "This isn't vengeance, Ms. Ellison. This is protection." He drafted a letter summarizing years of emotional abuse, the immediate danger, the hospital documentation, and witness statements. A letter that transformed everything my parents dismissed as ancient history into evidence. When he handed me the final draft to sign, I realized something. This wasn't the trembling, reactive version of me they had raised. This was the mother they had created by trying to break me. News traveled quietly through the family. Aunt Christine called again. "I spoke with Leah and the boys," she said. "They all told me what they saw. I'm so sorry, Amara. We won't be going to their house anymore." Barbara sent another message. "I confronted your mother. She tried to twist things. But after what you told me, I'm stepping back. I won't be attending events at their place." Small ripples, but powerful ones. People who once believed every polished lie my parents told were beginning to turn away. Not because I made a scene, but because the truth was undeniable. 3 days after my call with Pastor Graham, he reached out again. "Amara," he said gently, "I wanted you to know we've reviewed the situation. Your father will be taking a step back from youth ministry until further notice." I blinked. "And your mother will not be coordinating the hospitality committee for now." There was no sermon, no announcement, no spotlight. Just quietly closed doors. The absence would speak louder than anything else. My parents lived for appearances. Now, without saying a word, I'd taken away the stage they performed on. My father's life revolved around the backyard he built like a shrine, the grill he bragged about, the pool he polished every morning, the barbecues where he stood at the center of a crowd, beer in hand. That was his kingdom, his pride, his power. So I called his closest friend Greg, the man who co-hosted every party, who helped stock the drinks, who admired the pool the most. "Greg," I said, "I can't bring Sophia to any event at my parents' house, not after what happened." Silence on the line. Then, "I understand," he said quietly. We'll hold the next cookout at my place. Adults only. It's better that way." Better that way. Not safer, not necessary, better. I knew exactly what that meant. Greg had seen something in my father he didn't like. My father would notice immediately. His stage wasn't just wobbling, it was gone. While their world shrank, ours grew stronger. At home, Sophia started drawing again. Her appetite returned. She slept without nightmares. She laughed, quietly at first, then freely. She even asked, "Mom, can I show Jacqueline my drawings after my swimming lesson?" She wasn't afraid of water anymore. And when she floated effortlessly during her 3rd lesson, tiny arms spread like wings, Jacqueline clapped proudly. "You're a natural, sweetheart." Sophia looked over at me, beaming. and for the first time in days, I felt light. Everything had been leading to one moment: the recovery, the documentation, the formal walls of protection, the social isolations closing in around my parents. But there was still unfinished business. Sophia had belongings at their house: old toys, sketchbooks, her ladybug backpack, her star pajamas. I would need to get them, but not alone. This time, I would not walk into that house as the trembling scapegoat daughter. I would walk in with every ounce of the structure I had built behind me. My parents would finally see the version of me they had created: a woman who no longer feared them, a mother who would never compromise her child's safety again. That visit was coming, and it would be nothing like the ones before. A week after the incident, the world felt unnervingly calm. Sophia was healing, her laughter returning, her drawings bright again, her breathing steady. The fortress around us stood solid: CPS case files, police reports, school restrictions, new locks, new number. Only one thing was left: to walk into my parents' house one final time, not as their daughter, but as a mother reclaiming her child's life. I didn't go alone. At 10 a.m. sharp, Donna from CPS met me outside my apartment building. Beside her stood Officer Martinez, a tall, composed police officer with a presence that silenced any room he stepped into. Their expressions told me everything. I wasn't just supported now, I was backed by the full force of legal authority. "Ready?" Donna asked gently. For a moment, I felt that familiar twist of fear in my stomach, the same one I'd had since childhood every time I crossed the threshold of that house. But then I thought of Sophia, her purple leotard, her lungs fighting for air, her hand gripping mine in the hospital. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." The drive to my parents' house felt surreal. Even the sunlight felt different, brighter, sharper, more honest. No more pretending, no more hoping for basic decency. When we pulled up, my father was already at the front door, confusion etched into his face. "Amara," he said, stepping out onto the porch, "what is this? What are you doing with the police?" I didn't reply. Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Mr. Ellison," he said calmly, "we're here to retrieve the child's personal belongings. Please step aside." My father blinked, stunned. He had always expected me to come crawling back, voice trembling, begging for peace. He wasn't prepared for this. My mother appeared behind him, lips already pursed. "Oh, for crying out loud, Amara," she snapped. "You are dragging this out like a daytime drama, always with the theatrics. When are you going to stop embarrassing yourself?" Martinez lifted a hand. "Ma'am," he said sharply, "this is not a negotiation. This is a mandated retrieval authorized by CPS and the police department." For the first time in my entire life, my mother shut up mid-sentence. As we stepped inside, Vanessa appeared at the base of the stairs, arms crossed, like she was ready for a fight. "Oh, good," she sneered. "Did you bring security because you're afraid of a family conversation?" Donna didn't even turn her head. "You are not permitted to be involved in this process," she said, voice firm but low. "Return to the living room immediately." Vanessa froze. Her face, usually smug and glossy with self-satisfaction, cracked for the first time. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever blocked her path. No one had ever told her no, with authority behind it. She backed away slowly, the way a spoiled child steps back from a dog that suddenly growls. I walked upstairs with Donna beside me and a tote bag in hand. I knew every step of this staircase. I'd sat on it crying after punishments that didn't make sense. I'd stood on it, listening to my parents praise Vanessa for things they mocked me for. I'd once dreamt of having a daughter who would be loved here. That dream had died the moment Vanessa shoved Sophia into the water. In her old room, a space my parents had always insisted was for when she stays over, even though Sophia never felt safe here, I began collecting everything that belonged to her. Her two favorite stuffed animals, the sketchbooks she left last month, her pajamas with the little stars, her coloring set and markers, the souvenirs from her school field trip, her ladybug backpack. Donna helped me fold things gently, as if each item deserved tenderness this house couldn't give. Downstairs, I heard my father pacing. He kept muttering, "This is ridiculous, completely unnecessary, blown way out of proportion." For the first time, his muttering didn't make my chest tighten. It made me feel free. When I came downstairs with 2 bags full of Sophia's belongings, my parents were waiting in the living room. They looked small, not physically, emotionally, spiritually, as though someone had taken away the script they'd rehearsed for decades. I set the bags down. The room was silent. "I'm going to make this very clear," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "You will never have access to Sophia again. Not supervised, not unsupervised, Not holidays, not school events, not ever. My father let out a laugh, one of those half laughs he used when he thought he could intimidate people into backing down. Be serious, Amara, he scoffed. You don't get to make that call. He didn't get to finish. Officer Martinez stepped forward and handed him a set of documents. A thick set, the kind you can't argue with. This, Martinez said, is an emergency no-contact order, approved this morning by Judge Riley. My father stopped breathing for a moment. This order, the officer continued, bars you, your wife, and your daughter Vanessa from contacting or approaching Ms. Ellison or the child Sophia by any means. You are not to be within 500 feet of either of them. Failure to comply will result in immediate arrest. My mother made a strangled sound. Vanessa looked like someone had slapped her. My father's eyes darted between the papers and my face. You did this? He asked, voice cracking, not with sadness, but shock. No, I said softly. Your actions did. I picked up the bags and turned toward the door. Donna walked on my left, Officer Martinez on my right, a formation of protection I had never thought I'd see. Behind us, my parents stood frozen, not in remorse, not in realization, but in the stunned silence of people who had lost something they always assumed they owned. Not possessions. Control. The door clicked shut behind me. The sun hit my face. The breeze felt like a new beginning. Everything suddenly smelled like freedom. Not the dramatic kind, not perfect, but real. I strapped the bags into the back seat of Donna's car and inhaled deeply. That house, with its perfect lawn, perfect pool, perfect lies, was no longer mine to survive. They hadn't just lost an argument. They hadn't just lost a daughter. They had lost us. Forever. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel guilty for it. I just felt